Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us for the Sea Shepherd Show, episode 11. Thanks for taking time out of your Wednesday to join us. We have so much activity and information for you tonight. We're going to wait a moment or two to let the room fill up. But thank you so much for joining, and we'll begin in about one moment. Well, good evening, everyone. Good afternoon for folks on the West Coast. My name is Roger Fisk here at the Sea Shepherd Conservation Society. I'm the Director of Communications. Thank you so much for joining us. This is episode 11 of our Sea Shepherd Show. Sometimes I do stumble over that, but we started this earlier this year to bring news directly to you, our supporters, and our volunteers and our donors about the campaigns and the crews and the captains and the work that you all support. None of the work that we're about to share with you tonight, some of these updates, is possible without the support of all of the Sea Shepherd community, and we really want to thank you. We have so much going on tonight. I'm going to jump right in. We're going to give you an update on the Faroe Islands, the campaign that we are a partner with to Sea Shepherd UK, along with our friends at Sea Shepherd Global. We have some updates around Milagro as well. Tomorrow's going to bring you both of those. We have the debut of medium form length video about Operation Guadalupe that we're really excited about, and we're debuting it here tonight to you, our most long-term supporters, our strongest supporters. And then we have an announcement about the Sea Shepherd fleet, which we're really, really excited about. And as a little extra bonus, we put together kind of a little behind the scenes kind of glimpse of what's coming up after this announcement in terms of next steps. And then our big news tonight is Dr. Hiram Rosales of Operation Revilla, who's going to be joining us live to talk about his research on whales and how it helps inform our way forward in terms of conservation. So many of you know Tamara. She's quote unquote from the ships. She was on multiple campaigns. Tomorrow, I'm going to hand it over to you for a campaign update. So tell us what's going on out on the ships and with Sea Shepherd around North America and around the world.
Thank you, Roger, and good evening, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us tonight on this episode of the Sea Shepherd Show. My name is Tamara Arenovich, and I'm media with Sea Shepherd Conservation Society. As a veteran crew member who served on the front lines of over 10 of our campaigns around the world, it's my pleasure to give you an update on what's going on in the status of our active campaigns, because ultimately that's what Sea Shepherd is about, protecting marine wildlife worldwide. And our ships, our campaigns, and our crews who work tirelessly around the clock to protect the oceans and all of the animals that call them home. The dolphins, the whales, sea turtles, sharks. These are our clients, and they need our help now more than ever, and we remain on the front lines and continue to fight for them. So first off, news from the Faroes. Sea Shepherd Conservation Society partners with Sea Shepherd UK on the ongoing efforts to protect the white-sided dolphins and pilot whales that are slaughtered every year in the Faroe Islands. And I have a statement about the campaign from Rob Reed, who is Sea Shepherd UK's Chief Operations Officer. And I'll just read his statement to you now. After the unprecedented massacre of 1,428 Atlantic white-sided dolphins on the 12th of September last year, the Faroe Island government has set its first annual quota of 500 dolphins for the next 2 years in the face of an imminent UK government debate on the Grinderup. However, the Faroese attempt to deceive the world and placate the UK's Petitions Committee debate has dismally failed. The new quota is over 2.5 times the current number of dolphins killed each year on average, based on the last 40 years worth of data. And in a Faroese news article, an intention to raise this quota further has already been exposed. Both international and domestic opposition to the barbaric Grinderup hunts has been rejected in favor of killing dolphins by setting not a restrictive quota, but what some Faroese dolphin hunters will see as a de facto target to be reached. Sea Shepherd will continue our campaign together with the Stop the Grind Coalition and our crew and friends across Scandinavia and in the Faroe Islands until we bring about an end to these barbaric Grinderap hunts of dolphins and pilot whales. Now moving on to our news from Mexico and Sea Shepherd's Operation Milagro. I think many of you who are joining us tonight are probably already familiar with Operation Milagro. It is in fact one of our longest running campaigns. Sea Shepherd has been working in collaboration with the government of Mexico since 2015 to prevent the extinction of the world's most endangered marine mammal, which is the vaquita porpoise. Now, vaquitas are endemic to a small region in the upper Gulf of California, in Mexican waters. This is the only place in the world where they can be found. And the reason that the species is currently on the brink of extinction is due to entanglement in illegal fishing gear. In fact, this is the only documented threat to the survival of the species. So vaquitas are mammals, and like all mammals, they breathe air. So they must return to the surface on regular intervals in order to breathe. And then when they become entangled in illegal fishing gear, particularly gill nets, ultimately they drown. Now, working with the Mexican government, Sea Shepherd's Operation Milagro has removed over 1,000 pieces of illegal fishing gear from the vaquita refuge to date. And if not for these efforts, the vaquita would likely already be extinct. But they're not extinct. We know this past fall, Sea Shepherd participated in a vaquita sighting expedition in partnership with CONAB and our scientific affiliates. And we observed multiple vaquitas within the vaquita refuge, including 7 to 9 adults and 1 to 2 calves. They are out there, they are healthy, they are breeding, they are viable. The only thing holding this species back from a full recovery is entanglement in illegal fishing gear. And we remain on the front lines to ensure that that extinction does not happen. And we continue to fight for the vaquita, giving it the best possible chance of survival. We're very excited for the next chapter of Operation Milagro. As many of you know, the first 6 months of this year saw a significantly enhanced partnership with the Mexican Navy. We have upcoming discussions in August of this year with the Mexican government about expanding this partnership and options, discussions ranging from expansions of our naval assets in the campaign to increasing our time in the vaquita refuge and the ZTA beyond the Totoaba fishing season. So we look forward to sharing these details with you soon, hopefully in early September. And soon after that, we'll be implementing the new steps agreed upon in this long-running IUU campaign. And also, I guess from Mexico, one more brief thing, a bit of an update, Operation Guadalupe. The Martin Sheen is currently on Operation Guadalupe. Again, this is a long-running scientific campaign that we have in partnership with our scientific affiliates, excuse me, studies beaked whales around the Guadalupe Biosphere Reserve and other areas. Beaked whales can be found in oceans all around the world. They're hard to study because these are breath-holding champions who can stay down for hours at a time. So this is a really important campaign because you protect what you love and you only love what you know. So the more we can learn about these incredible animals, the better the better we're able to protect them. That's all from me. So I'm going to throw it back to you, Roger. Thanks for the opportunity to give you an update.
Thank you so much, Tamara. And speaking of Operation Guadalupe, this brings us to our debut of an incredibly powerful video. Chris, I'll hand it over to you. Feel free to take the reins over the screen, but this is hot off the presses, and everyone joining us here tonight is you're all the first folks to see this, so enjoy.
This may seem like a small study, but in fact, it's critical to know what we have on this planet in order to know what we need to protect. We don't know how to protect these animals if we don't know anything about them. And that's one of the most exciting things to me about this study, is that we're able to find things like we did on an expedition that I was with Sea Shepherd a year and a half ago. We discovered what might be a brand new species of beaked whales just on the coast 200 miles away. It's certainly exciting to me, but I think it's also exciting to the public to know that there are still secrets to be had, to uncover, to find out that there's something the size of a rhinoceros out there that maybe has never been described by science and never seen in any detail. We're here in beautiful Guadalupe Island, which is a national park in Mexico, primarily to study an elusive marine mammal called a beaked whale. These are called Cuvier's beaked whale, and they're rarely seen by most people. And we're studying them here, specifically at Guadalupe Island, because this is where a pristine population can be found. Everywhere else that we know that are high densities of these Cuvier's beaked whales have various human impacts. And what we want to do is find out, we know that humans have impacts on this particular species. In particular, Navy sonar has been associated with strandings of this species. So we wanted to study in a pristine situation, what are the reproductive rates? What are the survival rates? What's natural for these beaked whales in a natural condition? Then we can compare that to what we see in other intensive studies that are going on in more impacted areas to see what human impacts are having. Are we seeing fewer calves in those populations? Are we seeing higher mortality rates in those populations? So that's sort of the big picture of why we're here and why we want to study beaked whales specifically at this place. The way we study them is we start searching from this ship, the Martin Sheen, a Sea Shepherd provided vessel. We have a 3-person watch, 2 people looking ahead, 1 person looking back. And fortunately, we don't usually have to hunt very long because this has one of the highest densities of beaked whales I've ever seen anywhere in the world. And once we see them, we load 3 people, 3 of our scientists, and they go out in the small boat and they get close to the whales, and they get, the primary way we study them is through identification photographs. So we take photographs of each individuals. Fortunately, these beaked whales have lots of marks on them from cookie cutter sharks and from scars from other beaked whales. We can tell with a good picture every whale apart. Whales up over here. What we're able to do then is follow the same individuals through time because it's a relatively closed population. The same animals keep coming back to the same areas, and we can study them through time. And we can see this mother had a calf 2 years ago, and the calf isn't here anymore, and she's with a brand new calf. So we know that from that the birth rate is 1 calf every 2 years, or sometimes it's 3 years. It's a very non-invasive way to study what that population is doing. They're up behind you. That was 23 and 30 seconds.
We're just on the cusp of learning so much more about them because of 2 new tools, genetics and acoustics. And we're just at the point now where we're starting to link those 2 things together. But beaked whales, we think, might be affected by noise that humans make, in particular the Navy sonar noises that are very common off San Diego, where I live. And one of the most rare species, we think, in the world lives right there, right where the Navy testing happens, and then down probably about halfway down Baja, as far as we know. But we've never linked the sound with the species. So we know that there's been dead whales that have been found along that beach, not very many. And we know that there's a sound that corresponds with where these strandings happen, but we don't really know how to fit the sound with the whales. And that's how we put all these pieces of the puzzle together, is we use the acoustics to understand the distribution and how the animals are feeding. And we use the genetics and the photography all put together to be able to learn about their social structure and how quickly the populations can grow. And of course, the important thing about this particular study is that they aren't affected by humans very much. And so they're a nice, healthy, pristine population that we can use to compare to areas like the areas off of San Diego, where there's lots of human activities and the whales are much more likely to be affected by those activities. And so they're really important to have that comparison to understand whether these threats are very serious threats or not. We don't know how many species of whales there are, or dolphins, or porpoises. I mean, it's an amazing thing, but most of the descriptions of new species is done with a skull. Well, you can imagine that you can't do that with whales and dolphins and porpoises. And you especially can't do it with beaked whales because they live out in the deep, remote parts of the ocean where we don't have animals that wash up on the beaches very often. So the skulls are very rare. And so we have very poor understanding of how many species are actually out there. But conveniently, it seems like every species makes a different sound and a very characteristic sound. And so the acoustics is sort of telling us, hey, this might be a new thing. And then we can go out and try to get the genetics to match it and see, oh, is this a new thing, or is this a form that is similar but not so different that it's not really a new species. And so every year in the past few years, we've been describing new species. And just this last year, there was a new species of beaked whale that was described. You know, that's a really exciting and a very important thing for conservation, because if you don't have a name for something, people don't know to conserve it. We don't even know their distribution. So it's been a really important tool to put these two things together, but it's not all put together yet. So there are quite a number of sounds where we haven't gotten a genetic sample or even seen the animal. And up until recently, most of the beaked whales were listed as data deficient. And we've learned so much in the last 8 years since the assessments were last done that we were able to take most of them off. But there were still 8 species that had never been seen alive in the wild, which I think is just an amazing thing. But the acoustics, I think, is going to help us know where to go and look for these species. I've been doing marine mammal work now for 40 years. And when I started in Alaska, if you hadn't been a patient person that knew that it took a while to get the reward, you'd never last. I worked on bowhead whales, and I was out on the ice 2 months every year for 6 years, so a year of my life. And out of those, a year of my life, we got 1 good season. And, you just have to realize that it takes a lot of patience to get data, especially with endangered species. But you see so many other beautiful things. It's rewarding all the way. So, I learned to value, watching the migratory ducks, arrive in the Arctic. And every place has something like that. I mean, it's so many magical moments, and, you have to live through some pretty rough ones. Some, like really scary, violent seas, or, getting stranded, or being attacked by polar bears, or crashing in planes. But it's all worth it, because you end up having such an amazing experience all over the world and doing some amazing things, I think, for the animals at the same time, which is what makes it rewarding. I feel very privileged to have had a job that was so rewarding and working with so many really great people. It's been a great journey.
Wow, thank you, Chris. Excellent work down there in Operation Guadalupe. This brings us now to the announcement that we're all looking forward to. So, Chris, maybe you could keep control of the screen and bring up that still image that we're going to talk about here a little bit. And then we'll have that short video after. But what you're looking at is a ship currently called the MV Tiger. And due to the support of people like the Ruth Stanton Foundation and the William C. Bannerman Foundation, both of whom have challenged us with a match grant. Any funds that are given up to $120,000 between now and August 15th, these two foundations will actually match them. This ship is now under contract with the Sea Shepherd Conservation Society. So let me just tell you a little bit about it before we hand it over to our director of ship operations. This is called the Tiger, as I mentioned. It was built in 2005. Its gross tonnage is 88 tons. It's 150 feet long. You're going to see pictures as we go along. You can see that deck, and you know that the work we're doing in Milagro, you can imagine what that space is going to allow us to do. And I should speak just briefly about how this is going to help us be more effective in the zero tolerance area in the Vaquita Refuge. This will set us up about 2 stories higher than the current ships that we have in the ZTA. And it will allow us to monitor almost 6 or 7 miles in every direction. And then the current cutters sit 7 feet in the water. This sits 12 feet in the water. So we can really essentially plunk it down in the middle of the ZTA. And instead of spending a lot of time coming and going and trying to get back to the ZTA when there's an incident that requires us to be there to monitor it, we can actually have something like this that can stay there throughout and increase our ability to be a resource there on behalf of the Vaquita. Some of the interesting things about it, it's actually certified to carry 22 people, which is, for those of you that have done campaigns, it's significantly larger than what we're able to do. It's got a 180 cubic foot walk-in cooler and freezer. So we're really excited about this. This is the big news about the fleet. This is a huge step forward for the Sea Shepherd Conservation Society fleet. We're really excited about what the Tiger is going to be able to do for the Vaquita, for our efforts in the Vaquita Refuge. And Chris, maybe you could tee up that video. And while you do, we thought it would be fun to show you just a little bit of a behind the scenes glimpse of what is it like kind of when we start to look at a boat and what are the steps that go into it. So we're going to hand it over. Octavio Carranza recorded this for us with some images. This is like kind of the first time we saw the Tiger, and talk a little bit about kind of the steps that go into Sea Shepherd Conservation Society acquiring a vessel. So Chris, why don't you hit play on that and we can hear how this all works.
Hi, my name is Octavio Carranza, and I am the Director of Ship Operations for Sea Shepherd Conservation Society. So, as you can see, there are many steps from finding the vessel, to buying it, to preparing it, and to becoming a Sea Shepherd vessel. When we find a ship that fits our needs, we put it under contract. What does that mean, under contract? Under contract is a time where we can actually look at the boat, we can take it out of the water, we can have our engineers assess it, and determine whether or not we want to continue with the sale of the boat. After we go through the contract period and do the necessary surveys, if the vessel fits our needs, that is when we put in an offer. If the seller accepts our offer, we will then take the vessel and put it into a refit or maintenance period. In the refit period, we essentially get the boat ready for campaign. So if we're taking the MV Tiger, for example, we need to put a new crane on it, we need to renew the decks, and we need to prepare the cabins for our crew. It's not quite as easy to find a Sea Shepherd conservation vessel as most people might think. It has to meet a lot of criteria. The number one criteria is whether or not we can use it on campaigns. And that taken into account, we have to consider the range of the boat, whether or not it can stay offshore for long periods of time, and just the campaigns in general. The MV Tiger is an OSV, which means it's an offshore support vessel. And that is good for us because it can stay offshore for long periods of time and it can handle almost any weather. We are very excited to have the Tiger as part of our fleet and protecting our oceans against IUU fishing.
So there you go, directly from Octavio, our Director of Ship Operations. And that's just a little glimpse into what goes into Sea Shepherd Conservation Society acquiring a new ship with support of everyone joining us here tonight and thousands of people, hundreds of thousands of people over the decades that have supported our mission of protecting and conserving wildlife. This brings us to our star of the evening. So Tamara, if you want to join us, and Dr. Rosales, I'll hand it over to you so that we can learn a little bit more about Operation Revilla.
Thank you, Roger. It is my great pleasure to introduce you to our esteemed collaborator and my friend, Dr. Hiram Rosales. Dr. Rosales is a professor and researcher at the Autonomous University of Baja, California Sur in La Paz. In 2018, he founded the Marine Megafauna and Fisheries Research Program at UABCS, and he is the academic manager of the Whale Museum Rescue Center at the university. Dr. Rosales is going to discuss his research with us tonight, his research on humpback whales around the Revillagigedo Archipelago, which is a UNESCO World Heritage Site located 240 miles southwest of Cabo San Lucas. Dr. Rosales, welcome to the Sea Shepherd Show, and thank you so much for joining us tonight.
No, hi, Tamara. Thank you, everyone, for the invitation. It's my pleasure to be here. Well, and I am really happy to can talk about the whales and to talk about the ocean. That at the end is important, that because I am sure that everyone here is fall in love now for the ocean and for the life that stay in the oceans.
So how did this all begin for you, Dr. Rosales? Was it a love for the ocean or for whales that led you to want to study them? Or was it keen curiosity for science that ultimately took you to whale research? What sparked your interest in? How did this all begin for you?
Well, in general, when I was young, I fall in love now for the diversity of the life. So I think that it's amazing that you can find the small shapes of life, no, and big shapes of life. And when I learn about the whales, I fall in love because I understand that they are vertebrates and even they are mammals like us. They need milk. They take milk like us, and also they need to breathe air in the surface, no? So I fall in love because I understand that this is an evolutionary process with many changes and many pressures and many disadvantages, no, during the process of the evolution. So I enjoy to study about this, to discover and to learn how these animals has the adaptation and how the animals are living in the oceans.
Indeed. And so tell us a little bit about the research that you're doing specifically as it relates to humpback whales in the Revillagigedo Archipelago. Can you give us a basic overview of what it is that you're doing out there and what you hope to learn?
Well, the first time that I was in Revillagigedo was in 2003. And in the first second that I watched the Socorro Island, that is the biggest island of the archipelago, I fall in love, no? Because this is a oceanic islands, like you say, this live little bit more than 200 miles far away from Cabo. And if you make a line between Cabo and the middle of Mexico, you can find Revillagigedo. But well, I fall in love because before that I visit Revillagigedo, I was working with humpback whales in Bahia Banderas, close to Puerto Vallarta in Mexico. And immediately I know the difference with a area with a big human activity in comparison with Revillagigedo. That is a really pristine area, no? no many activities, no human activities, really, well, at this moment, only boat for dive, and only researchers and only the marine guys that are safe or guarding the area. So Revillagigedo is like a natural laboratory. You can study the behavior, the ecology, the physiology, and any aspect of the biology of any species that you want. But in particularly, I am interested in humpback whales because these whales, well, in some moment, more than 100 years ago, they was really close to the extinction because, well, the whalers was hunting for the oil and another process. But even with this species recovering, no? And this species now is one of the high hopes for the people because it's one of the best examples that if we save the ocean, the species can recover, no? And it's not only the species, it's all the ecological process that are together with the species. When we take one species to the extinction, we are erasing not only the species, if not a complete ecological process, but also an evolutionary process, no? For many, well, thousands or even million years. So Revillagigedo, you can work with humpback whales in a very, very pristine area without perturbations. And you can make comparisons with another areas. And we have a lot of human activities. And with this, we can take decisions, no? The tourism, of what kind of tourism we can do, of how intense the tourism can work, and how intense the activities that we are doing can affect the different species, in this case, the humpback whales. And also is another interesting thing is that the humpback whales are a migratory species, no? And it's a good example that we need the collaboration, not only between researchers or not only between ONGs or researchers, if not in general with the world, because, for example, the humpback whales of Revillagigedo, many of them come from Alaska, but another come from Canada. And even some of them come from Russia. So this is a kind of work that need to inspire a lot of people, and not only the local people, no? But well, come back to Revilla. Well, for me, Revilla is a wonderful area because it's very precious area to study the whales without perturbations, and we can learn a lot that we are doing in another areas and to make comparisons.
Not to mention that it's just an incredibly beautiful place in the world to be. I've had the privilege to work with you on this campaign in the past, and it truly is a magical area and shows, you know, like what our oceans can and should be when conservation measures are put in place. It's a magical place, and it really is a place worth protecting. Dr. Rosales, so we've had the privilege of working with you on your research on this study for several years now. Can you share with us some of your findings? What have we learned over the past few years going out there on Operation Revilla? And how does this information help us to further protect whales?
Yeah, well, the primary goal of our research is humpback whales, but it's not the only goal, no? We are working with another cetacean species. But well, in general, the first goal that we are making is that we have the capacity to return to Revillagigedo. Revillagigedo is a very important area for the mating population of humpback whales that come from Alaska. And the last year that a real effort with research was doing before that we come back in 2018 was 2006. So we have 12 years without any real deep research, no? And many things can happen at this moment. The first surprise that we had when we returned to Revilla is that we don't see so many whales that 15 years ago, no? But now that we are continuing the monitoring, we are taking the same numbers that many years ago. And this well, the explanation that we are wondering is that the oceanographic phenomenon that appeared in the North Pacific, the name was the blob, was affected the body condition of the animals, no? And these animals need a lot of fat reserves to the mating and to calving. So now we have more whales than 3 years ago, and this is a really nice news. The other thing that we are learning is we are using drones to take measures of the animals and to take measures of the body conditions. And like I say my students, well, this is the first word that in Mexico that, or the first data that we have in Mexico about the measures of the humpback whales. Because before of this, the only measures that we had was of the whalers, no? The book of the whalers, but they don't catch really many humpback whales in Mexico. So we don't know really how big can be the humpback whales in Mexico. And we are learning the size about of the animals, the condition of the females, the size of the calves, and how many can grow during the breeding season, because the humpback whales stay in the island approx 2 or 3 months. Another thing that we are learning, so we have a collaboration with a big project. The name is SPLASH, Status of Populations at Level of Abundance of and Status of Humpbacks. And we are using a platform to put the tail flukes, because each whale has a different tail fluke. It's like a digital print. So with this, we are knowing of which area the humpback whales that are visiting Revillagigedo come from, no? So this kind of information can permit to make new abundance estimations, and also to know how the whales are moving. Because like I said previously, the humpback whales has the characteristic that they move in a big area, no? From Alaska to Revilla and even to Central America. And for this, it's necessary that we know how they are moving, because if we want to protect the whales, we need to understand how they are moving. But also, well, I can talk a lot about the humpbacks, but another species that we are really interested is the bottlenose dolphins. The bottlenose dolphins in Revillagigedo now, they are more famous. Revillagigedo is a big famous place in the world, because it's considered one of the best places in the world to dive with marine megafauna. And it's famous for the big mantas, but also for the great diversity of sharks. But another species that is really, really charismatic for the divers is the bottlenose dolphins, because like you can remember, the bottlenose dolphins are really friendly and they are really curious about the people. But really, we don't know so much about these animals, no? In other areas of the world, we know that they can establish local populations, and also they have 2 ecotypes, the coastal ecotype, the oceanic ecotype. But in Revilla, we don't know really how different and how similar to another areas these dolphins are. And well, with the work that we are doing during the last 4 or 5 years, we are discovering that this group is resident to the islands, no? And they move only between the islands, and they are genetically independent of the other areas of Mexico. So this is wonderful, and this is a good example of the powerful tool that can be this small sample that we watch in the video, no? With the big whales. This small sample that really don't injure the animal can give us a lot of information, no? And well, we are also making research with false killer whales. That false killer whales move between the islands and between the Revillagigedo Islands, and also we are taking samples of. And this is important because Revillagigedo is the biggest marine reserve in the North Pacific. But to protect this area, to understand why it's important to protect this area, that this area is free of fishing, we need to have information about the importance of the ecosystem or the ecology of the species. So we are learning that these animals are resident, these animals move between the areas, and they are feeding fishes inside of the national park. So this is important for the political decisions, no?
It is absolutely. Science and conservation go hand in hand in enhancing policy and protecting all marine species. Dr. Rosales, thank you so much. It's fascinating stuff, and we could talk for hours about it. But for the sake of time, I need to move on because I have some very important questions for you from our junior sea shepherds. So these are some kids who are deeply engaged in being good citizens of this planet. They are interested in all things relating to ocean conservation and animals. And when they heard that you were going to be on the show tonight, they sent us some questions because they want to know what you're doing, and they want to get to the bottom of this and ask some really important questions about whales. So if it's okay with you, I'd like to ask you a few questions on behalf of our junior sea shepherds. The first one is, have you noticed an increase or decrease in the number of marine species or whales in the marine reserve over the course of this campaign?
Well, how I say it some moments, when we return after 12 years, without research or constant research with cetaceans and in particular with humpback whales, the number of the whales when we return was low. So we are very, very sad and very worried about it. But after this, we are reading papers about Hawaii. In Hawaii, in similar years, 2016, 2017, the number of the whales dropped in 60%, 70%. A lot of whales, they don't appear in the migratory areas, no? Well, in the breeding areas. But with the time advance, the whales appear again. And well, looks like was a response and quickly respond to the change in the environment. And this is a very important example that why it's important that we are making monitoring continuously. Because sometimes we can say, well, we protect this area and it's a natural protected area and suppose that nothing happened and we have the animals and we leave the area, and when we come back, we have a very sad surprise, no? For this is important that we understand the biology, the ecology of the animals. Fortunately, now the numbers are much more similar than the 15 years ago. And well, now it is a big project that we are part on with the Revilla data, that the goal is to make a new estimation of the humpback whale population in all the North Pacific. But looks like the humpback whales, well, at least in the past year, humpback whales are a good example of the recovering population, and it's a good example of the high hops to the ocean. So for now, at least in numbers, the humpback whales are a high hop, no, for the future generation.
Wonderful. And I think we touched on this briefly, but what other animals do you study in addition to humpback whales?
In general, I study marine megafauna, but the species that I know much better, or that I focus my work for the last 20 years, are cetaceans. For example, bottlenose dolphins and false killers whales. But also we are working with orcas. We have a citizen science project with orcas. We have a lot of reports of sightings into the Gulf of California. But also we work with fin whales, and also we work with bright whales. Well, and we are trying to take data. Well, something that is important is that to do science is really expensive. And well, I want to say this because it's important. Without the cooperation or collaboration with Sea Shepherd, for us like scientists, at least for me, it's impossible to go to Revillagigedo because it's really expensive, no? And unfortunately, the science in Mexico doesn't have many resources that we need. So for this is really important, the collaborative work. But another thing that happened is that we try to optimize every peso that we have or every dollar. So also when we are in the ocean, we take data from the sea turtles, we take data from the big mantas to try to understand how they are using the habitat, no? Because the fears, or maybe one of the most basic answers to try to do conservation is to understand how the animals are using the habitat.
Okay, I think we have time for one more question from our junior sea shepherds. And it's a good question. Why do whales jump out of the water?
Well, this is, even we have a scientific paper that the title is Why the Whales Breach, no? And the short answer is that they breach for many reasons. They can breach for communication, but for example, the cows can breach because they can be stronger, because when they need to return to the feeding areas, they need to do a long migration, many thousand miles. They also breach because they want to take out the parasites, and they breach also because they can do, no? I also, all the time I say my students, imagine that you are live in a dense environment like the water, and when you breach, you feel the air. And it's curious, but at least in my experience, you can know that the whales, at least the humpback whales, breach much more when we have windy days, no? Maybe they feel something about, or even if they want only to separate the parasites, or they want to communicate, or they want to be strong, or they want to communicate emotion or something.
Amazing. Thank you so much. I didn't know that. And it's really, really interesting. Dr. Rosales, thank you so much for joining us tonight. It's truly been a pleasure speaking with you again. I hope to see you out there on the ocean again sometime soon. Without further ado, I'm going to hand it back over to Roger, but thank you for joining us tonight.
Thank you, Tamara. Thank you, Doctor. And thank you to everyone who tuned in tonight. We've talked about the Faroes. We've talked about Milagro. We've talked about Guadalupe. We've announced the Tiger. We've shown you a little bit about what happens behind the scenes when the Sea Shepherd Conservation Society acquires a ship. So don't forget that the Ruth Stanton Foundation and the William C. Bannerman Foundation have challenged us with a matching grant between now and August 15th. So any money that's donated up to $120,000 will be matched by these two generous foundations. Thank you so much for joining us for Sea Shepherd Show episode 11. You can go to seashepherd.org to learn more about the matching gift challenge and all of the campaigns that we've discussed tonight. All of this is made possible by the support of our donors and our volunteers and our supporters all around the world. So thank you so much, and look for our announcement about our August show, and let's keep working together to protect marine wildlife. Thank you, everyone.